Hello and welcome to the Lions Awaken show. What is government? What was it created for? Are we as Christians supposed to submit to government no matter what? No questions asked. Does the government have the right to control our lives and give and take away our God-given freedoms whenever they so choose? Even if it's in a pandemic? And what are taxes really meant for?
Good questions.
Great questions, right? Well, because we as Christians have failed to answer these questions, let alone ask them, this has led to some serious mass government overreach in our society, as well as, and I'm afraid to say it, church irrelevance in the West.
Whoa.
Yep, it's true. But don't worry, because here on Lions Awaken, we're going to answer all those questions for our listeners.
Let's be courageous.
And for ourselves. Let's be courageous.
Let's speak truth, baby.
That's right. We're going to answer them in our brand new 4-part series called Caesar and God.
Ooh, this is going to be fun.
Mm-hmm. This is the first episode where we are going to be talking about the role of Caesar, a.k.a. government, and what all that entails. But first, let's start off with the scriptural foundation for this series, which is Matthew chapter 22, verse 21. I'm only going to say half of it because this half is the only one that applies to our episode. Then Jesus said to them, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's." Matthew Detweiler, what is Caesar's?
Well, Caesar represents the government, right? So I guess the first question we should ask is, well, what is the government? It'd be good to know what the government is before we get into what they're supposed to do.
That's right.
So it's just kind of a brief explanation, which is actually Abraham Lincoln said it best in his famous Gettysburg Address, where he said that the government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now that's basically it. Their government is just the common people, chosen by the common people to represent the common people in all the things that they do, and we'll get later into what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically just like they were never meant to be an elite group of people to rule over people, but to serve the people and represent them. And yeah, that's
for a time, and then just move on.
Yeah,
and they were never with their lives.
It was never the government was never meant to be a career. It's meant to be a duty.
That's good
to carry out, to lead the people.
Yeah.
So
service for one's country and people.
Yeah, and so which leads to the next question: what did God create government? Did He create government? Is government good?
Government is good. Government was created to be good. That's the whole point of it. I guess our scripture for that is the famous Romans 13 scripture, which we will talk in another episode about the real meaning behind that and the submission part of all that. But I think we need to bring it in this episode because Paul here does a great job describing what government is meant for and what it's supposed to do.
The position
of government. That's right.
Yeah.
And their roles.
It's good.
So let's just read a little bit of it. Or we can just read it all. Romans chapter 13. All right. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes, which we'll get into later. For the authorities are ministers of God, attending to do this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. So, Paul here is describing the government in a judicial sense,
Yeah.
and a policing sense, a military sense. He not once describes them as a provider of our needs sense, just a protector of our existence, of who we
Of
are, of
good and evil.
that's right, executing justice for
Yep.
its citizenry, protecting them basically from foreign and domestic threats by
Yep.
people who do wrongdoings and who can conduct evil. And so the way how he's describing government here is kind of how your founding fathers described government in the Constitution. But if
For real.
even if we look at, let's say, 1 Peter 2:13-14, let's see what Peter has to say. He says, "Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good." So again, it's a judicial type description. It's not a social welfare program type description of government,
Right.
which we'll get into a little bit later. But that's kind of it from at least the New Testament perspective. There's other smaller scriptures, but those were kind of the major ones that people go off of.
Okay, so when we know that the positions are meant for good,
Mm-hmm.
then it really draws the attention to we need to put good people in those positions, Christian people.
Yep.
Because if you don't, you're going to have evil people which aren't going to do their duty. And
Mhm.
John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, really understood that. And this is what he said about that. Quote, "Providence has given to our people the choice of their rulers, and it is the duty as well as the privilege and interest of a Christian nation to select and prefer Christians for their rulers." Unquote.
That's good. Yeah, because what Paul was talking about was the position of that ruler, not the ruler himself.
Right.
Because Nero at the time was not a good ruler. He was a horrible ruler. So if by him saying this, he would contradict himself. So he's talking about the position of an emperor, the position of a president, not actually Nero or Joe Biden, like submitting to those people. But we'll get into all that in another episode. But that's the description. It's mainly a judiciary type position to basically stabilize the civil society by maintaining the peace, to execute justice for its citizens in a court of law with no partiality, and to protect and defend the nation's citizenry from foreign and domestic threats. So judiciary, policing, military. Those are kind of the main roles of the government.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Those are the main ones.
Those are the main
They
ones.
have a lot of other ones.
Smaller ones.
Smaller. I
Yeah.
mean, the government is, the foreign policy and all that kind of stuff, infrastructure, commerce.
Yeah.
They kind of have a role in a lot of different stuff, but what you said are the main things
They need to stick to.
why God has created government.
Yeah.
Those are that's what
That's their
we're
purpose.
created to do.
Yeah.
And if they get outside of those duties or they enact policies that don't,
That force people to give up their money to give to other people.
yeah.
And that's when it's like, okay, you're going into another lane here. You need to stick to your lane.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to what is the constitutional mandate for government, Matthew? You American. You beautiful American.
Well, the founders kind of laid it out in the Declaration of Independence when they said that our inalienable rights come from God, which are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And because of these, governments are instituted among men to secure these rights. That's the basic thing of government. And we kind of boil it down to 3 jobs that the government has, which is enforce the common law, protect and secure citizens' God-given rights and freedoms, and neutralize foreign and domestic threats. Those are basically the 3 main jobs that government, and that this is all levels. This is federal, state, and local level. Again, those 3 all have distinct roles as well, but that's not the purpose of this episode. The purpose of this episode is to really
Lay the
foundation of what they're supposed to do, and these are all supposed to abide by the law of the land, which is the Constitution. So, and the common law, basically all our rights are common law Harry Truman understood where those come from, and he was a Democrat, 33rd president of the United States from 1945 to 1953. And
Are we allowed to quote a Democrat on here?
well, let's see what he says.
Okay. All right.
He said, quote, "The fundamental basis of this nation's law was given to Moses on the Mount. The fundamental basis of our Bill of Rights comes from the teachings which we get from Exodus and St. Matthew, from Isaiah and St. Paul. I don't think we emphasize that enough these days," end quote.
Dang.
He understood that the Bible
pretty
has a huge part in laying out our foundations.
Yeah, it seems like your Constitution almost like reflects the Bible. Like, is that right?
I would say you're right.
Like I'm saying, the mandate for government is reflective of what we were just saying with the biblical mandate, right? The main things, which were judiciary, policing, military type stuff. And so, enforcing the common law, right? And protecting secure citizens and all that. So there's a pattern here. There's a pattern here of what government's role should be.
Yep. So what did Jesus mean when he said, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's"? Because he was talking about taxes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he was talking about taxes. First of all, Jesus is drawing a sharp distinction between the two kingdoms that we as Christians are part of. Caesar's, which is the earthly kingdom, and Jesus's, which is the heavenly kingdom. And also, like what you were saying, Jesus legitimizes both government and church by saying there's a role for Caesar, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. So there's a legitimate thing to that. And then, but also he limits government by saying, oh, wait, and also give to God what belongs to God. So don't give all to Caesar. You got to give to God as well. So he limits government in that as well. He legitimizes it and limits it. And I could go to, into theological interpretations of this, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to give a literal, practical interpretation of what he meant right here. And that is to give the government what it needs in order to do its main role and purpose, which is what we were saying, maintain and stabilize a society through peace, through executing justice, through defending and protecting its citizenry from foreign and domestic threats. Taxes, the government is the citizen's employee, paid to do its job by protecting its citizens, right?
Yep.
So taxes is nothing more than a paycheck to the government for doing their job. That's it. Not for doing anything else. We shouldn't pay them to do anything else. And that's why in Luke 2, John the Baptist, he says to the tax collectors, don't collect more that is legal. Don't collect more than you need to do your job. And again, Paul, he was saying that that's why you pay taxes, because the authorities are working for God when they fulfill their duties. And what are the authorities' duties? Well, we just finished saying it.
Yeah.
So taxes, they're just a paycheck for the government to do their job. They're never meant to make politicians rich. Like we were saying, government's not supposed to be a career. It's supposed to be a seasonal duty, and then you move on and continue your life.
And taxes are supposed to be limited as well.
That's right.
There's we're okay with paying a certain amount of taxes, but the amount we're paying these days is just
way
too much.
But that's because there's a divide right now, and that's why we're doing this series. Especially in the church, there seems to be a divide right now, especially these past 5 years. It's been going on for decades, but on what the government and the church's role should be doing when it comes to social issues, such as taking care of the poor, the sick, the widow, the orphan, the immigrant. There's been a divide on whether the government should do that or the church should do that. And we believe the government should be completely out of that, completely away from that, because they've been doing that, and it's been a disaster.
Yeah, look at the fruit.
Look at the fruit, exactly. So we believe the church should be completely and utterly in control of those social issues, because Jesus mandated that towards the individual and towards the church, to freely help people and to freely give, not to forcefully take someone else's money to give to someone else like that. It doesn't work. It just
No.
doesn't work like that. It's a, it may sound nice on paper, but it doesn't work. It's a disaster.
Right.
And like what you said, look at the fruit. I think give that statistic or whatever about the 30 cents on the dollar or whatever.
Yeah, supposedly there's been studies, and supposedly if you give the government $1, for every dollar you give the government to help the poor, only 30 cents of that dollar actually goes to help the
To
poor.
help the poor. But see, if you had that full dollar in your own pocket, you can go up to the poor and give them that full dollar directly.
Yep.
You don't need a middleman to help people.
Right.
You can just do it directly. And that's
Yeah.
what the whole thing was based on in the New Testament, with Christians coming together, selling what they want to sell, and then, putting in a pot and helping each other out freely. It was all free. It was all freely given.
Yeah,
Nothing,
voluntarily.
Voluntarily, that's right.
Yep.
So yeah. That's
That's good.
that's what we have to say.
Yeah.
On that.
So, I mean, is it Donald Trump's job to take care of the poor and be a pastor? I mean, is that what we voted him in for, or did we vote him in to be the head man to secure our country and put America first?
Yeah, I mean,
we have to understand those things when we go to vote.
You're right.
What are we voting in?
Yep.
What is their job?
Exactly.
Like you said, you're not going to hire a
musician
to come fix your plumbing at your house because that's not his job.
That's right. You're going to hire a plumber to fix your plumbing because you know what he's doing, and that's his job description.
Exactly.
Stick to music, you musician.
That's right.
Stick to policing, military, and judicial stuff. Government. Please stick to that. And church, we got another job, baby. We got another job. But I
both are important. Like
both are very important.
And
That's
church
right.
were both instituted by God. One is not more important than the other.
They work hand in hand.
Yes.
They're not. If you look through history, they've always tried to dominate each other. It's always been the church trying to be the government and doing that stuff, and the government trying to be the church, implementing morals and all this stuff. Like, no, stay in your own lane. Don't swerve in each other's lane. You need to stay in your own lane. The church has its purpose and its role, and the government has its purpose and its role. And they just need to go straight down the lane in their own lane. Stop swerving in each other's lane. Stop trying to dominate each other. We're trying to work together hand in hand because they're both institutions created by God.
Yeah.
We are the body, the church, and the government is the sword. It's supposed to protect and defend. It's not supposed to be the moral compass of our society or helping with those social issues and stuff like that. Trying to change the heart of man. That's the church's job, which we will get into in episode 2, baby.
Yes. It's going to be a fun one.
The role of God, aka the church.
Yeah.
It's episode 2. But I do want to read this quote by Barry Goldwater. And he says, a government big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take everything from you. Let that sink in.
All right.
That's what we're seeing right now with this mass government
exactly
overreach.
what's happening.
Because government's swerving in lanes it shouldn't be.
They want things, but they don't realize the consequences of being given free stuff.
That's right.
Your freedom will be taken. How much do you value your freedom?
Mm-hmm. And once you know these roles, the distinction between these roles, then you can know, okay, then you can confidently and courageously say, hey, government, you're out of your lane right now. You got to get out of that. And I'm talking about Christians and pastors who, don't know the difference.
Right. And know your rights so that you know
when they're taken away from
they're taken away from you, because the government is supposed to secure your rights. But if you don't know your rights, how are you going to know if the government's securing your rights or violating your rights?
Boom.
So
all right.
It's good stuff. So what is the role of the church?
Well, if you stay tuned, you'll find out in episode 2.
See you there.
See you then.